In the mid-18th century, Worcester in the province of Massachusetts Bay stood inland from the Atlantic seaboard, positioned along rising uplands and river valleys that connected coastal trade routes with the interior settlements of New England at times. By 1750, the town functioned as a modest administrative center, its courthouse and meetinghouse organizing civic life, while dispersed farms and small workshops reflected a population still oriented toward subsistence production rather than specialized manufacturing or extensive commercial exchange. Geographically, Worcester occupied a transitional landscape between coastal plains and the rugged interior, where rolling hills, forests, and arable soil shaped settlement patterns and constrained agricultural surplus, influencing how residents balanced local needs with participation in broader colonial markets. Transportation remained slow and seasonal, with rough roads connecting Worcester to Boston and other towns, meaning that goods moved by cart over difficult terrain, reinforcing a local economy in which self-sufficiency and barter continued alongside limited cash transactions. Population growth during these decades was gradual, as families expanded and migrants arrived from older coastal communities, bringing with them established practices of land use, religious observance, and town governance that reinforced continuity within the developing interior society. The meetinghouse served both religious and civic purposes, reflecting the enduring influence of congregational structures in Massachusetts, where sermons, town meetings, and local decisions were intertwined, shaping social order and reinforcing shared expectations about authority, morality, and communal responsibility. Education in Worcester this period was informal yet valued, with basic literacy encouraged for religious reading, while practical knowledge related to farming, carpentry, and trade passed through families and apprenticeships, embedding skills within life rather than formal institutional settings. Local governance operated through town meetings where property-holding men participated in decisions about taxation, infrastructure, and communal obligations, reflecting a political culture rooted in direct participation yet limited by gender and property qualifications that excluded many residents. Economic activity centered on agriculture, with corn, wheat, and livestock forming the basis of sustenance, while small-scale industries such as milling and blacksmithing provided essential services, linking Worcester modestly into regional exchange networks without transforming its agrarian character. The presence of roads toward Boston and Springfield allowed limited trade of surplus goods, though transportation costs and distance reduced profitability, ensuring Worcester's economy developed cautiously, shaped by constraints discouraged rapid specialization or integration into wider Atlantic commerce. Relations with towns formed a network of mutual dependence, where goods, labor, and information circulated slowly, reinforcing regional cohesion while preserving local autonomy, balance that would influence Worcester's response to political tensions emerging across the colonies in subsequent decades. Indigenous presence in the region had diminished significantly by this period due to earlier conflict and displacement, yet the memory of contested land remained embedded in local understanding, shaping perceptions of settlement legitimacy and the use of surrounding landscapes. Worcester's social hierarchy was modest, with differences in land ownership and wealth present but less pronounced than in larger towns, creating a community where status existed yet daily interactions crossed economic boundaries within shared institutions and cooperative labor practices. Religious observance structured calendar and reinforced discipline, as attendance and moral conduct were monitored within tight communities, contributing to social cohesion while limiting dissent, a pattern of New England towns in decades before revolutionary change to alter authority. By the 1760s, imperial policies began to reach inland communities, as taxation measures and trade regulations affected prices and availability of goods, gradually drawing Worcester into wider political debates that challenged established relationships between colonial society and British governance. Local reactions to these policies were measured, shaped by distance from coastal centers of protest, yet discussions Worcester reflected growing awareness of imperial authority, setting the stage for direct involvement as tensions escalated across Massachusetts in later years. The gradual politicization of Worcester illustrates how inland towns were not isolated from imperial conflict, but integrated through economic ties and administrative structures, contributing to a broader colonial response that would culminate in organized resistance and eventually revolutionary transformation. As communication improved through print and travel, Worcester residents became increasingly informed about events elsewhere, reducing isolation and fostering a shared colonial identity that transcended local concerns, an important step in aligning disparate communities toward collective political action. Despite these changes, daily life in Worcester remained grounded in routines of labor, family, and worship, demonstrating continuity even as external pressures mounted, a dual condition that defined many New England communities on the eve of profound political upheaval. The town's infrastructure, including roads, mills, and meeting spaces, represented incremental development rather than rapid expansion, reflecting a long-term structural pattern in which growth followed population needs and resource limits, shaping Worcester's trajectory well into the 19th century. This period established foundational patterns of governance, economy, and social organization that would influence Worcester's later transformation, demonstrating how mid-18th century conditions created a framework within which revolutionary change and subsequent development would unfold over time steadily. By 1800, Worcester remained a modest inland town. Experiences of gradual economic integration, evolving political awareness, and stable social structures positioned it to adapt to the national context emerging after independence, carrying forward legacies rooted in the preceding decades. During the early 1770s, Worcester entered a period of intensifying political awareness as imperial taxation and regulation became more visible, linking local grievances to broader colonial concerns and gradually shifting attention from purely local governance toward questions of authority and representation. Printed materials and correspondence circulating from Boston reached Worcester with increasing frequency, carrying reports of protests, debates, and legislative actions, which helped residents interpret imperial policies not as isolated measures but as part of a larger pattern affecting colonial autonomy. Town meetings became more politically charged, as discussions expanded beyond routine matters to include responses to British legislation, illustrating how local governance structures adapted to address external pressures while maintaining established forms of deliberation and communal decision-making. Committees of correspondence and inspection began to emerge, providing organizational frameworks through which Worcester residents could coordinate actions, monitor compliance with non-importation agreements, and align their responses with those of neighboring towns and the provincial leadership. Economic adjustments accompanied political resistance, as merchants and consumers reduced reliance on imported British goods, encouraging local production and alternative supply networks, a shift that reinforced both economic resilience and ideological commitment to collective action against imperial authority. The enforcement of boycotts required cooperation across social levels, demonstrating how economic behavior became politicized, and how everyday decisions about consumption and trade contributed to a broader strategy of resistance within Worcester and across Massachusetts. Geographically, Worcester's inland position influenced its role during these developments, as it served as a gathering point for regional coordination, connecting rural communities with the political activity centered in Boston while maintaining relative distance from immediate military confrontation. By 1774, tensions escalated significantly following the implementation of coercive measures by British authorities, leading Worcester residents to participate in organized opposition that included the interruption of court proceedings, signaling rejection of imposed legal structures viewed as illegitimate. The closure of courts in Worcester represented a decisive local action with wider implications, demonstrating that resistance extended beyond protest into the disruption of institutional authority, contributing to a breakdown of normal governance that preceded armed conflict. Militia organization intensified during this period, with local men drilling and preparing for potential confrontation, reflecting both defensive concerns and growing willingness to support collective colonial action through organized force if necessary. Communication between Worcester and other towns became more systematic, enabling coordinated responses and reinforcing a shared sense of purpose, which helped transform scattered opposition into a more unified political movement across the region. When armed conflict began in 1775, Worcester contributed manpower and logistical support, though it did not serve as a primary battlefield, illustrating how inland communities supported the war effort through mobilization and supply rather than direct engagement in major engagements. The departure of men for military service affected local labor patterns, placing additional responsibilities on families and altering agricultural routines, demonstrating the social consequences of war within communities that remain geographically removed from combat zones. Economic strain accompanied wartime conditions, as disruptions to trade, inflation, and shortages challenged Worcester's stability, requiring adaptation and reinforcing reliance on local production and resourcefulness in the absence of consistent external supply. Political authority shifted as revolutionary structures replaced imperial governance, with local committees and provincial bodies assuming greater control, illustrating how Worcester participated in the broader reconfiguration of power during the transition toward independence. The war years also brought ideological change, as concepts of representation and rights became embedded in local discourse, influencing how residents understood governance and their role within emerging political systems beyond colonial frameworks. Despite these transformations, social order remained relatively stable, with established institutions such as churches and town meetings continuing to function.